Good morning, everyone. Yeah, so a little bit about me. Like Charlie said, started LeanDog 11 years ago. So I've been doing this a long time. Started kind of before the manifesto with extreme programming. I was up in Cleveland building a couple Agile teams. Nationwide Insurance kind of owned the company that we were working for. We were a child company, and we basically asked at some point, okay, can you come help us transform Nationwide? How many people are from Nationwide? Anybody? Okay, cool. All right. So most people know about us because LeanDog, because we're on a boat in Cleveland. So this is an 1892 steamship. If you ever come to Cleveland, you're welcome to stop by. We have free parking. We got toys. We got a bar. We got a creative space. So we're right by the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, tied to World War II submarine. So that's where we're at, and that's where we do a lot of not only coaching and teaching, but also product development. As I said before, I started this really with Victoria Insurance, Titan Insurance, and then Nationwide. And when I was asked by not even Srini, but the previous CIO, to actually help transform Nationwide, what I did is I basically said, well, I don't know how to do that, but I know a lot of awesome people in Columbus that are also passionate about business agility and being agile. So I came down to Columbus. I hung out with all of my coworkers that were really passionate about this, and we formed a change agent team, and we came up with a plan on how we were going to try to transform Nationwide. And I spent the next 6 years doing that. Had so much fun doing it that I eventually left and started LeanDog 11 years ago, and that's what we kind of do for a living. So this talk is going to really be about not only what worked at Nationwide, but how we, over the last 11 years, we continued to hone the practice around lean and systems thinking to transform companies. So this is going to be kind of our recipe for success.
And I'm Brian Link. I'm really just kind of here as John's sidekick today. He talks a lot faster than I do, so I'm going to let him do most of the talking. I have kind of a long background in working in consulting. It was fixed time, fixed price consulting, so it forced me to really learn how to manage scope really well before I could even spell Agile. And then I kind of transitioned that into working as a CTO of multiple startups, including Dig out in San Francisco. So that kind of forced me to be really good at continuous delivery. I was learning Agile before I even got into it. But since about 2006 or 7, I've been working on nothing but Agile projects, a lot of transformations, big companies, small companies. I've lived all over and have, much like John, started as a kind of a technologist who stumbled into this, but was always passionate about the process and the business.
So, okay, so these are kind of the LeanDog 8 steps towards business agility. All right, so as I mentioned before, LeanDog, our typical clients are 400 and up in IT. We do work with smaller clients, but typically, it's kind of agile at scale. I think that one of the most valuable things I learned at Nationwide, and for those of you that are still Nationwide, was when we first started the development center at Nationwide, we were really kind of about Scrum and Kanban and XP, but we really weren't about Lean. So once we started really introducing Lean thinking and systems thinking, which is more of a management approach, right, than it is a process approach like Scrum and Kanban. Once we started embracing Lean, and it really kind of held it together. I don't think we would have been successful if we didn't do it. So my goal today is kind of walk you through our 8 steps to business agility and how we go about this. So, it's not that like frameworks are okay. It's less safe, dad, Nexus, all of them. But what I think a lot of the frameworks miss out is it doesn't really consider your culture and your organizational design, okay? And so a lot of times when people implement a framework, they just want to drop it on their existing organization. And I think, and that's where I think that a lot of people mess up. So it's not that we can't come into a safe implementation or something once it's started and try to correct it, and I'll talk about how we do that. But basically, I think that there's goodness in all of this, but I think that how you start is the most important part of any transformation that you go to business agility.
It's the old way of thinking, right?
Yeah.
It actually kind of, people think prescriptively, and so they latch onto the framework and think it's going to be a prescriptive answer to get them to the solution. The reality is we're all stealing bits and parts of this for a good reason, because there's great nuggets of knowledge in all the frameworks out there, but the trick is to customize it and deliver it in a practical way, which is what John's going to talk about.
Yeah. So first step, we created Obeya. So what's an Obeya? It's Japanese for big visual room. I started doing this talk in 2008, and I called it Big Visual Room. And all of a sudden, somebody at Nike called it Obeya, and then everybody loved it because they love Nike, right? So it's funny how words mean things. Yeah, so basically, I think that it really is, what we do is about systems thinking. How do we understand the current system? One of the biggest problems we have is that we're knowledge workers trying to apply technology to provide business value, and the world that we live in is so complex, right? And especially in a large-scale organization. And so if you're at the company for a year or 20 years, you actually have a completely different understanding of how things get done within that ecosystem, right? You understand the culture, influence, right? How things work, right? And usually the people that are most successful are really good at understanding the system and getting the system to work for them, and that's the culture. So we basically start with information radiators. So, not working. So basically the problem with humans are that we want to agree with each other. Like it's much easier to agree with someone than disagree with someone. So I can just look at you and shake your head and say, yep, Charlie and I are on the same page, right? Reality is if we're off just by a little bit, then what we think we're going to do next to improve the system could be different, right? It doesn't take much, but your next step is going to be based on your current knowledge. So if we aren't at the same baseline for how we're going to start a business agility transformation, we can't get off to a good start because we're going to disagree about how to get there. So we make things physical, right? And that's information radiators. We put things up on the wall. We now realize we aren't on the same page. Now we can actually converge, right? And we can see, hey, let's get on the same page. We all see it the same way. And so this is the first step of our business agility transformation is we build a big visual room, right? Once we all agree on and have a consensus exactly where we're at and what the current state is, now we can create an organizational change plan, right, that makes sense. That we all agree this is where we should start, why we should start here, because there's many ways to go about your transformation.
You're going to see lots of overlap too. Visual thinking, everything
Yep.
visual, trying to apply systems thinking at scale, being practical.
Yep. So we have the Nickelodeon model, cat dog, right? So we bring in, we call it change agent team. This is exactly what we did at Nationwide. I came down here, I said, hey, who are all the awesome people at Nationwide that believe in change and want to do this, and they're active learners, right? And then we apply the dogs, so we're the cat dog team, right? And that's kind of our committee, right, for making change happen. So in any culture, I don't know how many people are familiar with Rogers Innovation Bell, but in any culture, you probably have, if you laid your org chart out on here, you have a certain amount of people at your company that are innovators, early adopters, early majority. So these people who are waiting in line for the iPhone, right, for 2 weeks, when they know that if they wait 2 weeks, they can just walk in and get one, right? So they want to be first, they want to be on the edge. And then what happens is when you go through a transformation, you really need to get the tipping point. You get about 20% of your organization working agile, and humans will human. In other words, they will copy good things, okay? So these early majority, once they see what worked for these guys, they're going to say, hey, I want to work like they do. And they say, okay, I want to work like these people do. These people would just run, okay? They're your laggards, okay? They're like, I can't work in an accountability culture. So I think the biggest mistake that I see when people start their transformation is when they drop a framework on top of an organization and don't look at their organizational design, they're coaching the wrong people, okay? If you just drop it on a team and you have laggards and late majority, right, good luck, right? Because they're going to be fighting and resisting everything that you're supposed to do. They aren't going to be setting an example. And our job at LeanDog is to build people and not be there forever. We're not a staff augmentation company, right? Our job is to kind of build your internal capability so you have this energy and you can continually grow and learn, right, without us. So I think that's probably the number one mistake I see in a transformation.
It amplifies everything. If you have the people who are passionate actually being your champions, it helps the entire transformation go faster.
Yep. And so we're going to talk a lot about a bunch of different customers, but one of them is M&T Bank that Brian and I are working on, and lots of people in this room are actually. So we basically usually start with about 8 or 10 change agents. So these are the cats, not the dogs, right? And we facilitate usually a 3-day session, and we actually build out visual walls. Okay, these are the most important walls. You know, what's your business? What are your products, your customers, your markets? What's your organizational design? So your hierarchy, org chart. We're going to talk about your demand and your demand funnel. We're going to understand your technology. We're going to value stream map out your work, right? And then we're going to create a change plan based on that. We can do that in about 3 days. It doesn't have to be perfect. We just have to start somewhere. So the goal is to get on the same page in 3 days, and after that, let's start, okay? And we'll iterate and we'll adapt, right? It's never perfect when you start. So the key is to start, right?
And keep revisiting it.
And just keep revisiting it on an iterative basis. I'll talk more about that. We've done crazy ones, like we did one at Cardinal Health down here for the Fuse. We built 31 walls, okay, in about 3 weeks, right? It was a different goal, different outcome they were trying to get because they were creating like this innovation hub, and the team was storming and norming, trying to figure out what are our roles and how do we do this. So that one was a much longer engagement, but this pretty much works for anything. We can build lots of walls, but we start with this kind of first 6. So this is actually the one at Cardinal, at the Fuse. So you can see, basically, it's pretty simple. It's brown paper, it's Post-it notes. Over here, you can see there's a value stream map. Over here is their current org design. This is a future org design, so we had to reorg because they basically dropped a bunch of people in the building and say, hey, be innovative, right? Not the easiest thing to do. And here's a bunch of legacy code that you have to maintain while you do it, right? So the goal here was to say, okay, what is it we're managing? What's our purpose, our vision? How do we work? How are we organized, right? And how do we kind of regroup and challenge our org design? It wasn't even plausible that everybody they dropped in the fuse were the right people, right? Because they just dropped a bunch of people in there. So right away, we knew we had some roadblocks, right? Which is, do we have people on the left side of that innovation curve, or do we have people on the right side, right? And the right side's going to drag down the left, okay? So this is an example. This is a Cardinal Commerce subsidiary, Visa. That's their big visual room. You know, it's in their cafeteria around their ping pong table. It was the only space they had. It really doesn't matter. What's nice about that, it's in a highly visible place because everybody has to eat, right? So that meant you got lots of input, and people were standing around the walls absorbing information, contributing information about their current systems thinking and how work gets done at Cardinal Commerce.
When they're visible, people actually use the walls, which is great.
Yeah. There's another example of Bright Horizons up in Boston, a daycare, child care company. One of their walls, but again, it's cheap, it's easy. This is Bright Horizons. This is us mapping out their very first wall. So I always start with this wall. What's your business, right? Why are you there? What's your outcome? How are you organized? What are your products, right? It seems simple, right? Because if you work there, you know that. But if you're new to a company, you walk in and you're on day one, you probably have to learn all this, right? So the beauty of this is actually when we interview people at companies, we actually walk them around this room and they learn all about the company. Here's what we do, here's who we do it for, here's how we measure it, here's the work, here's how we're structured, here's how you fit into this picture, here's the technology you're going to work on, right? So it creates this kind of integration to the company, right? And I typically tell people, if you walk them around this Obeya room in an interview process, and at the end of it, they haven't told you how they can actually help, just take them out the door, right? Because you just kind of expose your entire system, and they should be talking about how they can add value to that system. Okay, so it actually serves another purpose.
Well, and most companies don't even know their own information. 40% of the whole company doesn't even know what their own company does. So this is a really great kind of level setting for them.
Yep. This is another example in M&T Bank. This is actually their business wall. So this isn't the IT, this is business agility, okay? So the whole point, we know that for successful transformations, we want this to be business-driven, not IT-driven, right? And so in this case, we mapped out 375 SVPs, right? The CEO, CIO said, hey, guess what? Before we start this agility thing, we need to train the business, okay? And when I say train the business, like 3 hours with us teaching them and the CIO teaching them about what is agility, why does it matter, why are we going this way, making sure they understood that it really was about business outcomes more so than IT outcomes.
There's another 4 layers of management underneath this. This was just to help us understand who the heck has even heard the message yet, and are we getting them in all of the different divisions so we could build up champions across the entire organization, start spreading the viral Agile disease.
You get the CEO up here and it works down, and we basically decided to take a top-down approach at education, right? So the same message was heard throughout everybody that was about to go through this, because they had to recognize we were going to change the company culture, and that's a big deal, right? And nobody likes to say their culture is bad. So when you tell them you're going to change it, it's like, okay, well, what's wrong with what we have, right? So it was really an important message from the top, and we'll talk about it later. We actually use this as you can't see it, but there's actually orange dots on everybody's name that we have actually taught. And then we also have another kind of system for the people that we don't think are quite getting it, that we're going to do more reinforcement and understanding what agility is.
And that same deck that John put together to teach the executives Agile has been since shrunken down and is now being something that I'm delivering to the 500 project managers and BAs throughout the organization.
So another thing too is our technology soup, right? You know, your business partners need to respect what we actually do and understand that the IT side of things. So this is mapping out system architecture, you know, different types of systems. All those blue things are different technology we've implemented to provide business value. So it's not like your business partners have to know everything, but they have to have appreciation for the complexity of the system, right, that we do. So when they ask us to do something, we can talk about all the things that's going to impact and talk about risk and everything else like that. So sometimes we even go a little bit further and we add all the technical debt. So we'll actually categorize the tech. We'll put up here how many help desk tickets they have, what's the usability like. So any kind of metrics around the assets that we can do that we think we need to radiate to our business partners. Now, the demand wall, okay? So this is the biggest problem, is that we're all knowledge workers and everybody wants something from us. They want us to build something and do something. And the demand is usually out of control. It's always too much demand, not enough supply. I mentioned I went to Ohio State. I got my econ and my engineering degree here. But the demand, once you make it physical, you're like, holy crap, this is insane, right? We don't have a way to say no, right? We don't have a way to prioritize value, right? So Making it visible, I mean, we've gone to the point where we've printed every single help desk ticket, put it up on the wall just to make a point, right? Hey, we don't even have quality systems, or we don't even have good design systems, so our design thinking is weak, and that's why we have so many help desk calls, and that's why our quality of our code is bad, and that's why we have so many tickets, and that's just all weighting down the business value we deliver. So business agility, right, it's getting rid of that waste and saying, okay, everything we design should work and not require a lot of support, internal, external, it doesn't matter. The world's moving to microservices, cloud. You never know what you're going to build internally. It's going to be external tomorrow because the market's constantly changing, right? And you have to be able to respond to that market. You have to be able to expose your internal stuff for self-service like the way the world's going, okay? So this is usually the biggest wall in the room. It's usually ridiculous how much stuff's up on the wall. But when you put it up, you kind of laugh at it. And we say, oh, this is stupid. Everybody knows it's dumb. We have way too much work. We're just adding people to lists, right, as if they're going to get what they want just because we put it on a list, and that's not true, right? And so when you make it visible, you're like, why do we have so many big lists of things we could do, right, when we don't have that much capacity with the organization, all right? Then next thing we do is we map out your workflow, so value stream mapping and lean, right? So how do things get done? Again, another recipe of business agility is what steps do we go through? How does work come into our work stream? How does work get out of our work stream? How do we push to production? How do we deliver value, measure value? And when you start mapping this out, it also looks crazy. I mean, I don't think we've ever been a customer that didn't have at least 50 to 100 steps.
They don't have well-polished value streams just sitting around.
Yeah. So when you start doing this, you look at this and think, wow, this is kind of crazy. Look at all of the different steps. And so again, business agility is end-to-end flow. You heard that from some of the other speakers, right? How do we reduce steps? Because we created all this specialization in our craft, and we're knowledge workers. So it's like the telephone game. We're handing knowledge off to the next person, the next person, the next person. Every single time we do that, there's a cost of delay, right? There's waste. So how do we actually shrink this value stream down? So this is a core part of a transformation, is understanding that we're going to actually shrink this value stream down, and we're going to figure out how to say no and shut down that demand wall to saying yes to everything. And I'll get more to about the whole HR and finance implications of that later. So that's another value stream map. That looks really, actually, I don't know if it looks simple, but that was like 6 weeks of work to try and understand this one company of actually how their value stream map worked. And it's constantly changing. They're constantly, now what they're saying is, okay, well, geez, instead of handing knowledge off, can we create T-shaped people and cross-train people so we don't have all these gaps in knowledge, right? So that we have to keep waiting on someone else to get the work done. Again, that's business agility. That's why Lean at Nationwide worked for us, because we also started having that waste mindset and saying, okay, every time there's a step, there's a delay in between. That delays that business outcome from actually happening, right? And why does that delay happen? Is it necessary? Or is it just bureaucracy and politics that got built into a large organization with lots of people trying to get things done in a world where they can't get everything done, right? That creates a lot of waste in your system. So step 2. So everywhere we go, Agile's already started. I mean, Manifesto's been around since 2001, right? So at some point, they're either in the middle of an Agile implementation or the beginning, but it's probably not working too well. So the first thing we need to do is containment. So again, right now, if you dropped Agile in your organization and you didn't look at your org design, you probably have people on the team that shouldn't be on the team, right? That's kind of a reality, right? And so now you're fighting that. So the first thing we need to do is contain it. So how do we do that? It's the same thing we did at Nationwide. We said, hey, we need a floor in a building or a boat or a BMW dealership or something cool, right? And we're going to actually take all the people that say they're doing Agile and we're going to put them in the same room, okay? Now we can compare apples to apples, right? And we can actually do what we call mob coaching on them. So we're doing this at this bank.
With open spaces.
With open spaces. We moved the CIO in, his entire leadership team, right? We moved all the teams in that were trying to do it. We knew that we had challenges. Some of the people in the room probably weren't great at servant leadership. We probably didn't even have psychological safety, right? We had people that was just dropped on them. And so our hardest job as a coaches aren't necessarily coaching you on Agile and Kanban and XP and all that.
People.
It's all the people issues, right? So by putting them all in the same room, we could actually say, okay, now we're going to create this energy, and this is new, this is different, this is the new culture, right? And we're going to make it small. So we did that. We also form communities, right? We do all kinds of lunch and learns, and
we do, and everyone gets to participate in it more. M&T originally wanted us to go around to their 50 buildings around Buffalo and coach them where they were. We're like, dude, that's not going to work. And so bringing them all together allowed just tremendous benefit of getting everyone on the same page and everyone hearing the same message over and over again.
And that's what happened at Nationwide with the delivery center. That's what happened at Cardinal with the Fuse, right? We started we started like looking at it. That's why the first thing we did was challenge the org design. Just because we're in the same room doesn't mean we have the right people in the room, we're organized right, we're working right, right? We had a lot of challenges with that. So this was our containment wall, right? I don't know how many teams are up here.
Yeah, it
14?
looks like just so many, but some of those are actually representing of multiple teams. We started off with 10 early adopters, and it kind of blossomed into somewhere close to 30 because some teams turned into multiple teams, and they were like, oh, we forgot about our support dudes. We're like, well, bring them over. And then all of a sudden, teams are organically growing, which is a much healthier scaling strategy when you're just getting going on a transformation.
Okay. So this is what the room looks like. So we got comfortably Kanban there. That's one of the teams. Whose team's that?
They started off comfortably Scrum.
And now it was Scrum, now it's Kanban? Okay. Yeah, so this is what it looks like. It's just a big open floor. There's an energy when you walk on the floor. Everybody's learning, everybody's communicating, right? You can walk to the next team, see what the next team's doing. You can actually see, go to these, we don't call them lunch and learns. What do you call them?
What do we call them? Learning League. We changed
Yeah.
the names a couple of different times.
Yeah.
We just do them like in the afternoon on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, and we'll teach people story planning, or we'll teach them about better ways of prioritizing and estimating, and people from all over will just kind of pile in and listen and ask questions. We've started doing a lean coffee once a week as well, so people can just show up and ask questions. This is like the beginning of an actual Agile community of practice.
So it's a learning culture, right? Not everybody's board has to look the same. We don't care. We're empowering the people to manage their work and learn, right? And so being able to walk over and see different boards and different levels of maturity across Agile teams is a good thing, right? It's like, oh, what's working for this team? Humans will human. Look, if they find something better and you have the right attitude and aptitude to learn, you're going to try that, right? And you're going to experiment, and that's how you learn. And so it really is critical. We celebrate it. We take pictures on the way. They call it the tree house. That's the space there. So people are coming to the treehouse, people come and tour the treehouse.
They're doing tours, like guided tours now. So we actually hand them a piece of paper like, hey, go visit these teams and learn something at each team so they can kind of take away from the experience. Because we've built so much momentum, there's all these people outside that aren't part of it, where they're like, a little bit of angst is building, I think. They're like, they want to be included. They want to be with the cool kids doing the Agile stuff. And so we're trying to give them little nuggets of things they can start doing every day. You could do stand-ups. You could do retros. You can do all these things, even if you're still having to follow your old, regulated business waterfall process.
Okay, so the next thing we do is establish a vocabulary. So again, nationwide, when we went off-site with the cats then, we didn't call them cats. We were Salmon Creek, but we went off, we wrote a playbook. We wrote 21 Agile tea leaves. This is our vocabulary. So you can't have a consultancy, even like LeanDog, drop a vocabulary on you. We will actually educate you on what we mean by Agile. So during this Obeya, we'll actually do a class. We'll do 8 hours from our playbook saying this is what we mean. Our job as consultants is to try to stay on the edge of modern product delivery and business agility. So we're constantly improving our playbook. We just published this 4th edition. But we give you about, 80 to 90 practices that we teach, okay, in this playbook. And then we actually compare what you're calling your Agile movement. So what your words? In every culture, there's good words and bad words. Like, oh God, don't use that Agile word, or don't call it a stakeholder, or don't call it a steering committee, right? There's certain, words have meaning because people have history. And so you have to figure out what are the right words for your culture, and then we'll build your playbook with you. A lot of things we teach are these things: servant leadership, lean, design thinking, Kanban, Scrum, extreme programming, DevOps, of course, right? And so they all have a different role. And it all depends on how we're going to start that change management plan to take you Agile where we start.
We effectively start threads of each of those in parallel because it takes a long time to get any of them to build critical mass.
So with all that jargon at the highest level, this is our simple picture. We call it the balanced team approach. Design thinking is all about the product and the business side. Lean and Agile up at the top, and then DevOps and engineering excellence, zero defects at the bottom, right? So those 3 things together we call a balanced team. And we also see people who, when they start their business agility thing, they always just start with process. We're like, wow, you're really behind. You're already 18 years behind the manifesto, right? Scrum was 1995, okay? And if you aren't going to embrace design thinking and engineering excellence, your path to business agility is going to be long and hard because you can't be Agile with crappy software, defects, bad design, right? So you really have to kind of start with thinking about, accept the fact that you're behind and that you need to start thinking about all 3 of these circles at the same time, not sequential. Okay.
We shared an awesome story with our CompuWare friend yesterday talking about automating the testing on top of their mainframe. And it's like, it doesn't matter what technology, you just have to move it and modernize it so that the whole company can benefit from the use of all your existing assets.
So we'll build out an Agile adoption wall. We have our posters out there, but we'll kind of say, okay, here's the LeanDog playbook. What's your playbook? This is an example at SafeLight right down the road. Basically, we took our playbook, we hung it up there. We don't assess teams. I actually trust that you hire good people, and you should trust them to tell you the truth. If you can't, then that's your next problem. So what we'll do is we'll bring people in the room and say, hey, we'll train you on what we mean by Agile. And you tell us all these different teams, are we always sometimes never doing the practice? Are we happy about the practice, sad about the practice, or just eh? Because you could do something and hate it, and that means there's no value, right? So we bring the teams in. We don't go around and say, hey, we're going to audit all your Agile teams and judge whether you're Agile or not. I don't care, right? I expect to bring them in the room, educate them. I expect them to tell us the truth. And the difference is, if they tell us the truth and we put up on the wall that they aren't doing something or they hate doing something, the difference is as servant leaders, we have to fix that. We have to give them the coaching and training. So people will tell you the truth if they actually get their reward. If they tell you the truth and you're going to smash them for it, they aren't going to tell you the truth. That's not the culture we're building. We're building this learning culture and psychological safety to say, yeah, I don't know. We do this thing, and it sucks, but we do it. And I'm just doing it so I get the box check. That's waste, right? It has to add value to your work, okay? Because it has to provide business agility. You have to get things done, okay? So that's a simple approach. We lose a lot of gigs because all the big consulting firms do like, oh, we'll come in for 6 months and audit the heck out of your Agile. And we're like, oh, we'll do it in like a day.
You could
right?
start doing work.
By teaching people and trusting people and having them tell us what's working, what's not working, right? And believing them, right? And saying, okay, we'll help you get past that. Go ahead, Brian.
I was just going to say, in 6 months of doing an assessment, you can actually start doing the things.
Yeah.
Make progress.
Okay, so the next important part, and this is another failed business agility, is that this becomes an IT thing. And so it's a matter of how do we actually drive this from the top down. And so this is an example of that same wall. You got the CEO, the CIO. They're looking at that wall, and we're talking with them about how are we going to convince them what business agility is and why we're doing this, okay? How are you going to build that message in from the CEO across the bank, right, about what we're doing and why we're doing this? So in this case, they have an entire, 10 people on a communications team?
Yeah.
Okay, that's how many people are working just communicating what business agility is, why it's so important, especially in the fintech space, right, and how we need to get modern in our product delivery. And so if we come in and we're only working with the CIO, probably not going to work, right? We need to be working with that guy, the CEO, right? Because that's the person who has to really believe in this and not just think this is just IT getting better, that realizing that we have to embrace technology in everything we do, and it's a business outcome, not an IT outcome.
So servant leadership is a huge part of everything we're doing. Like we said, we've started from the top, educating the executives. We're working with the teams, helping them get connected to those value streams. But in the middle, we have layers and layers of managers that we have to help them change the way they think. And so we've been working through, just the basics of servant leadership and telling them what to stop doing and what to start doing and what things to keep doing. Their skill set is actually still very valuable. And so we're trying to reinforce these messages because a lot of people start getting freaked out about whether there's a role for them or not. The business analysts, the project managers, the HR managers of the people and the teams. These 10 characteristics of servant leadership from Robert Greenleaf is just an awesome place to start. And just hearing the fact that your job is to listen, actively listen, actually care about your people, help be a steward to help people accomplish their missions, actually help them in their careers, ask them, how can I help you, instead of, what have you done for me? And those just basics are really helpful. And sometimes we've realized people just haven't heard it before. And so by telling them and sharing with them, they have the capability to do this innately. They've just been rewarded to do other things their whole career. Yeah. We also love this book, Sense and Respond. The client brought Jeff Gotthelf in to actually speak on these topics. And these 7 things really resonate with them. There's 8 things. We actually split one of them up. Just having, safety to fail, being transparent, and they have these little catchphrases. They love this, bias towards action, but actually aligned with the vision.
And so part of that is, again, from the top, hey, guess what? We are going to reorganize our organizational design. We are going to have less middle management. Yep, we are, right? Because we're going to empower the people to actually be people, right, and not have so many layers. Because that means, as middle managers, one of Mike's favorite quotes is, prepare to get uncomfortable.
Yep.
Right? Because you're going to get uncomfortable. And not all of you are going to be in the same role that you're in today. And he's just he's being completely honest and transparent right up front. Yeah, if you're worried, yeah, some of you probably should be, right? If you're laggards in my organizations or you're late majorities, yeah, you probably ought to be a little bit nervous, right? Because There will be fallout. So I say anywhere from 10 to 20%, okay, of the organization, the laggards will leave, okay, once we finally get over that tipping point. So this is an example of Cardinal Health. Brent there, really good leader, bringing his management team along, being humble in front of them, saying, hey, we all have a vote on everything. Just because I've got this, the title and the ball doesn't mean that I have more votes, right? I value all of your brains, and we're going to create decision frameworks that are collaborative, right, not authoritative, not command and control, okay? And that has to be upheld, and that means that the highest paid guy in the room doesn't always get what they want, right? It's the team that decides, right? Next thing we need to do is kind of shift now the business, right? Step forward to product and design thinking, okay? We're now fund people and we fund products. We don't fund projects. The word projects actually go away, okay? Which is huge, right? Think about that, because the world's project, I get my money, I get in line, I get everything I can out of you. I hope the hell I get what I want before my money runs out, right? That shift has to happen, okay? The best product companies in the world are product companies. They aren't project companies, okay? That's old school thinking, and I'll talk about how a lot of things have to change, though, to make that shift happen. We want to focus on the right outcome versus the right output, okay? So we just got something done, but was it right? Did we get the right business outcome? Because if you're running in a project mentality, you get in line, I spend my money, I get something. If I don't get the right outcome, it doesn't matter. I'm out of money, I'm out of line, right? And I never achieved the business result. So we need to be completely business result focused, and that might mean doing things once, twice, 3, 10 times until we get that outcome. If we're immature in design thinking, it's probably going to take us longer. If we're more mature in design thinking, we'll probably get it closer to right the first time, because we'll actually listen to our customers and not try to be our customers. So that's where design thinking and sense and respond come in. So a lot of people are talking about, you hear digital transformation, customer journeys. That's kind of how people are thinking about what's the journey of the customer on, how do we connect that, what is that end-to-end experience seamlessly throughout my corporation, where do they self-serve, where don't they self-serve, and really embracing that. Almost everywhere we go, there's not enough design thinking, right? It's not. Like 1 person to 10 teams or something crazy, right? And we don't even take the things we do internally and take the same passion for building great internal products as we do external products. And in modern software delivery, you have to recognize the fact that anything you do internally could be exposed externally for self-service at some point. So why not build it for design thinking from upfront? Step 5 is really, this is kind of the hardest thing, is how do we say no? Like, how do we actually manage that demand funnel? We have that crazy wall with 2 million things to do and 200 people to do it, and there's no way we're going to get it done. So how do we actually do this? This is an example of a journey map. So this is basically looking at a customer's experience going across all of these different life cycles. And then these things down here are actually Agile teams that we're standing up to support different phases of the journey.
Yep. And in the middle there are the capabilities that they recognized and assets that they already had. This is kind of how the company's trying to tie their brand new vision and mission to all of the teams of execution. Putting an executive portfolio together and actually calling it an executive portfolio so they show up and look at it is really helpful, because it forces them to actually see it all on one page. Next week, actually, they're putting up, this is just one division. They have 6 of these, and they're going to put them all up on the wall, and it'll be the very first time in over 100 years of history that they've ever seen their business strategy on one room.
And know the cost, these teams, these people, right? Because we fund people. We fund products, right?
Yeah.
So what's the cost for these people to support these products?
Well, what they discovered was their strategic element, the thing that gives them competitive advantage, is that second column, and they don't have a single team at the bottom down there. So like, oh, we have to shift things. We have to actually move people from over here to over there in order to actually achieve the value we're looking for our customers.
Okay, so now it's how do we actually scale? Okay, so we build this big visual room. We spend a couple of days together. We educate. We baseline. Right now we're saying, okay, now what do we do next? Where do we start? Are we going to do containment? What's our strategy going to be? There's lots of strategies. There's a lot of this are LeanDog-isms. But the containment, right? We contain these group. We put them in the treehouse. We got them we're coaching on them. We're uplifting them. We're graduating them. Right? We're putting them back out in the wild. But there's going to be pop-up cells, okay? And not terrorism cells, but right, hopefully good pop-up cells.
Rogue teams.
Because the CEO and the CIO are talking about going to business agility and explaining and educating everybody what it is. So good people, right, on that curve are going to say, hey, I want to start. I'm going to go to a business agility conference. I'm going to go to CSM training. I'm going to go to SAFE training, whatever it is, right? you can't, when people want to learn and improve, it's hard to say no. So these pop-up things are going to happen. So on almost in every strategy we do for transformation, we also recognize we're going to have to continue to contain the excitement and the energy. And sometimes when a pop-up sale happens, we say, hey, stop. We don't have, you can't. Or we say, great, come on into the treehouse, and we have capacity, we'll embrace you, right? So we have a backlog of teams, pop-up sales, that we know we need to contain. They're probably not under the right org design because it just popped up and people on the team were on their team, right? But that's okay, that happens. The other model is lift and shift. And by that, what I mean is you act like a startup. You take another space or the same space, and you say, hey, we're going to build 10 Agile teams. And they're 12 to 15 person teams. And if you want to apply to be on one, apply. And anybody in the company can actually interview to apply, okay? And we'll hire them just like we're a startup. We're starting a new company within our company. And they have to prove to us that, hey, yeah, I actually am on the left side of that curve. And it's how you know it, because I go to conferences, I go to meetups, I read books, I have a mentor. How are you showing me that you're actually on the left side of the curve versus the right? Like, what behaviors have you exhibited, right, to prove that you're worthy of coming into this, applying for this new job in this new company, okay? And so that creates an excitement. Another concept is what we call the amoeba. So we build a team, right? It usually takes 6 months to a year to get them kind of mature, depending on how much we're doing. And then we split the cell, okay? So we say, all right, great, that's an awesome team. You guys are great. Now 6 of you are going to go start another team, and you 6 are going to hire 6 people to replace those 6, okay? And so we'll do that kind of split cell approach, right? So that's also a good strategy. Some companies do the boot camps, like if you go to targetdojo.com, that's the most famous one, right? Or we're doing tech academies where you actually say we're going to immerse you in a fake project or even a real project for 12 to 14 weeks through a boot camp, teach you all the practices, and then put you back out in the wild. It's hard to do because when you get back to the wild, you have all the constraints of the value stream not working. So it's hard to do this, but some companies do it. And every week we're bouncing up against Safe, Less, Dad, and Nexus all over the place, and that's okay. We just need to figure out how can we kind of reset those movements so that we actually have the right people right on those teams.
There's hardly any companies out there that are just like saying, hey, we're ready to get started, come help us. They've already tried something, they're already working on something, so you have to work with where they are, meet the customer where they are, and help them heal where they've been to figure out how to go forward.
So at M&T, this is an example. That looks like a really simple board. There's lots of hours in front of that board trying to figure out what to do. What is our change plan? So we knew we'd have a containment strategy. We knew we could build new teams, but now we're going to refactor around business capabilities, okay? So we don't go anywhere where there's only one approach to business agility because it just doesn't make sense. Because you have multiple things you need to manage. And so it's a discussion, and it has to be your plan, and you have to build that plan. We can't build it for you. Step 7 is we now need to, this is the hardest 2 things ever to do, is shift your finance thinking and your HR thinking, okay? So remember, if we value people and we're fixing people, right, we need to focus on insourcing, okay? We're hiring 2,000 jobs back from India, right? Because we recognize that our knowledge workers are what give us that competitive advantage. And it's hard to do it when you're across the pond, there's a huge delay, especially if you're not doing behavior-driven development or acceptance test-driven development. But the point is that a lot of people, and for all of you who've been in this industry, you see this insource, outsource, right, thing go on all the time. We're finding that the companies that really are achieving high levels of business agility are insourcing, okay? Because the people actually work for the company, not work for a consultant who works for the company, and we're not swapping those people out, right, based on other client needs. So having that kind of continuity in your knowledge workers is extremely important to improving flow, because if you keep swapping the people out, right, your value stream map keeps getting longer, right? Because you're lacking knowledge to actually do the work, right?
M&T is actually leveraging that to their advantage. They've announced to the entire city of Buffalo, we're hiring 2,000 people, and it's now a publicity event as well as it is a growth strategy for them. And they're building this technology community center in the biggest building downtown Buffalo, and it's all of a sudden become like this huge momentum builder for not just M&T, but the whole city of Buffalo.
So the next thing we have to do is change how we get paid, okay? So if you think about it, if all the executives at the beginning of the year say, okay, well, great, I have a budget, I'm going to set my objectives, right? And I'm going to set, and everybody wants to exceed, right? So they're going to set lofty goals for what they can actually achieve. It's not possible that every executive can actually achieve those things. So right away, you're blowing up that demand wall to be a false reality, right? Because everybody's competing to get stuff done, and it's not possible. So what we need to do is change our actually HR incentives where it's actually about the team's outcome, not the individual performance. And that's the biggest problem I have with HR is all the individual performance models don't really work. In fact, when I was at Nation, I almost got fired because when I had to figure out how to do raises, I said, God, I don't know. And I've actually kind of exposed everybody's rough salaries, and I said, why don't you all vote? I'm only allowed to give out 4%. So I gave them wooden nickels, half a percentage each point. We did this kind of game, and we did some gamification around how do we decide if Charlie makes more or Jeff makes more. And so the team had to figure out how to do that balancing of handing out the money, not me. And then as a manager, I took, at the very last moment, I moved something at 0.5% so I could say I actually did my job, right, to check that box. But reality is this is a big deal. Not only do the rewards have to change the executives, it's throughout the company is really about outcome. And if the reality is we only give a certain percentage, let the teams decide of my team who's more worthy of that money than I am, right? And do that all the way up to the executive level. And this is a big deal. So it's hard to do. Not many companies actually make this leap.
Yeah,
I think in 11 years, maybe 3.
And yet, people talk about it. They know that the hero culture and rewarding individuals for hoarding knowledge and becoming experts in one particular thing, that's what they used to do. And now we have to encourage the teams to be cross-functional and self-sustaining, all these things that the HR policies and the Agile momentum don't quite align quite nicely yet. Everyone knows they need to do it, but it feels like the hardest thing to do, just like the funding.
Yep. So again, we're funding people and products over projects. That's probably the biggest takeaway. It's like, so we have to change the models to support that. If we don't change the compensation systems and finance systems, then the behaviors don't change, okay? Because you're still playing the same game. Everyone wants to make more money. Everybody gets funding, right? I want to get the most I can when I get funding. So you really can't kind of change to true business agility if you don't take these things on. And I say these things like they're steps. Really, all these things are kind of in parallel, right? When you start your business agility transformation, you need to kind of do all these things at once and be honest the fact that, hey, we have all these different things we need to do at the same time. Are we engaged with our finance and our legal and our facilities? And are we educating our CFO on how things need to change and why they need to change, right? Or are we just like pulling them along like IT folks and saying, yeah, we want to work Agile, so you must work Agile, right? That doesn't work.
And we started talking to the finance folks at M&T about beyond budgeting and all the kind of the agile ways of treating finance. And they just said, you know what, we can't deal with that yet. We're just going to do same old budgeting craziness. What do they call it? They call it the Thunderdome. They bring your business requirements and arm wrestle for funding. They're going to do that again in spite of all of the momentum they've built with Agile. They're going to do their budgeting process the same way in 2020, but they're committing to 2021 to change their funding model so that they can actually align to their teams as the currency model. The fact that Mike, the CIO, says that just warms my heart. He's like, the teams are the currency. He gets it. He knows that you don't have to count hours anymore. You don't have to worry about that. You can actually deal with all the capitalization and all the things that go along with that if you actually use the teams as the currency.
Yeah. So step 8 is really just use that, leverage that Obeya room. That Obeya room doesn't go away. We're continually updating it. You'll see that some things become high fidelity, right? Things that don't change much, we make them prettier because we don't have enough wall space. But we actually meet in iterations, right? Either biweekly or monthly, and we come in and we say, how are we doing the change management plan here? How are we doing it moving towards business agility? How are we measuring that we're getting there, right? And that room becomes like a living, breathing pulse of that culture because anybody walking in, in fact, it's funny, sometimes we do this when you have a C-level person leaving, like we just helped, like Joanne Fabric is a good example. They were shopping for a CIO. Okay, well, if you're a CIO and you walk in a culture, like, yeah, I'm going to interview with all these people, go run the gauntlet, you really don't know what you're getting into until you get in there, right? You hear all the lip service about how the systems work, what's working, what's not working, what do you need to fix? So we'll build out in a Obeya room, and they'll walk in. In fact, the guy was in the middle of winter last year, and he's like, I never met him, but he's like, oh, thank God you actually built out that room because I didn't know what I was getting into. And I'm walking around on a cold wintry day, understanding all the work, all the demand, all the business functions, right? And understanding the system, right? And the culture that I'm about to inherit, and understanding, okay, my job is to help get it to the next level, okay? So we build these Obeyas for lots of purposes, but it just works. I tell people, kind of going at Agile is kind of like going back to kindergarten, right? We all sit in a big open room. We put all our homework up on the wall. Everybody knows who the better reader is, right? We have recess. We have fun, right? We have a continual learning environment. We don't judge people, right? I don't know if you're going to be, a Rocketeer or, a fireman. It doesn't matter, right? We just value people. And so by building this kind of living, breathing Obeya room, what it's saying is we welcome everybody's knowledge. And if you walk in on day one and you want to be part of the system, this is the system. Yeah, and there's parts of it that are really bad, right? And we know that. But we need to improve this system, and we need to achieve business agility by honing the system and reducing waste, being more efficient, being more transparent, creating this culture. And so when people walk into it, you kind of get a feeling for exactly how you fit into that piece. And you also start getting an appreciation of what everybody else does, right, in their role, because you got hired probably to do one thing and several things, but then there's other people that have other responsibilities to manage parts of that system to get things done, whether it's security, architecture, doesn't matter, right? Everybody has a role towards business agility.
The more complicated you are, the more you need all of that visualization. Some problems are just so complex, people can't get their heads wrapped around it unless they've actually seen it visually. And that's what these rooms accomplish, is that people can soak in so much more information than they're able to consume. People are overwhelmed with all the emails and newsletters, so just coming into a room and being able to take what they want and learn what they want is powerful.
So we'll bring the executives in the room, we'll do show and tells about our change plan, how we're doing, what business outcomes we're trying to achieve, what's working, what's not working. Once teams graduate, we push them back out of the treehouse, out of the nest or development center. Then we'll do Gemba walks, which is, lean means going to the floor. So we'll actually assign a coach or someone to say, hey, you have these 10 teams and they're in 10 buildings and you're going to visit with them every once in a while. And not only are you going to understand what's working and not working for them, if we uncover better ways of working, right, then we'll also share them with them. So we create this kind of these practices of sharing and learning, right? It's just part of the culture and it's healthy. You want people to come Gemba walk your place, right? Because that means if they can help you, they will, right? I'm not here to inspect you, I'm here to help you. And if I can either bring you something or take away something from you, that's awesome, okay? And that's part of the culture.